Hello, beautiful stars. Once again, we have Dr. Ben Goins here with the iMedu Foundation Detox System. Oh, Ben, your new article for this month is amazing. I mean, even myself, I was like, whoa, this is a lot to take in all one reading because it was that good. Beautiful stars, his article is in the description. After we're done listening to Ben here, go and read it so you can really take it in. So thank you, Ben, for joining us again. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show again, Courtney. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So why don't you hit us with I don't even want to pronounce it because I'm going to say the wrong
Say
word.
it. Listen, I want to hear you say it. Come on.
It's not magnesium, it's mag. That's what I can do.
No, it's got an N before the G.
Okay.
Manganese.
Manganese.
No, manganese with an N.
Manganese.
Manganese.
Wow, okay.
But it is a corruption because it comes from the word magnesia with the G. So they flipped the N in front of it somehow, and no one knows exactly how. It looks like the word came from French, which came from Italy, but it really traces back to like ancient Greece and Turkey.
Wow.
From the magnesia area. Yeah.
And the majority of us humans, like, we don't even pay attention to it, I'm going to assume. And because most of us do know of magnesium.
Right. But it creates confusion in chemistry too, because these two elements have a really similar sounding name. One is magnesium, which is element number 12. And the one we're talking about in this newsletter is manganese, which is element number 25. So they're completely different elements, but they sound almost the same for historical reasons because they come from the same region and they were named after it. And that whole little backstory, I alluded to it a little bit. I talked about the end. I talked a little bit in the magnesium article because I wrote an article on magnesium before I wrote this one on manganese. So I sort of had to write about manganese since I wrote about magnesium because it always gets overlooked. It's kind of like people talk about bones, they always talk about calcium and they forget to talk about magnesium. And it's even worse with manganese because then if you're talking about bones, you might talk about calcium, you might talk about magnesium, but you might forget about manganese, which are also really involved in the bones. So there's a lot of that type stuff going on in chemistry where people just overlook things because of bad naming sometimes. But it's important. So it had to wait its turn, but I finally got to it. And then it just blew me away when I started reading about it because, my article came out really good, but it wasn't because I'm good. It's just I was trying to focus on one thing, manganese, and there was just so much to talk about it. The title of the article is Manganese Nutrition. So I was trying to make this a nutrition article, but something else evolved out of it. There's something else going on with this. So I don't know if you noticed it when you looked at it energetically. It really goes back to Magnesia area of Turkey, which was the area of the great goddess. And I could just see how these ancient peoples were using this for all kinds of crazy stuff in their temples and magic and medicine and all kinds of things. I think I mentioned it at the end, but there was one source that says that in the Middle Ages that some people thought this was one of the missing ingredients to the Philosopher's Stone.
Oh my goodness.
So this
article, because I can see that.
So this stuff is no joke. The ore that they found it in, they called it pyrolusite. And it's
like, what was the common name? It was like fire wash, right?
Yeah, pyro means like fire, and lucite. This is just my spitball translation. I don't know what the actual translation is, but the word is pyrolusite, and I think that probably translates as firelight or fire white or something, like lucite. So, and the reason I think that is because they had temples to Artemis, and one of the nearby temples was Artemis Leucos, which was like white. So this was probably like a sacred holy ore in their Greek temples, and they were probably. And I didn't realize you could use it for fire starter. And really? Yeah. And I mentioned that in the article, but see, in my previous article on magnesium, so okay, I guess we'll just get into it because there's just too much information. But just it really starts when you just look at the name of it. It starts out confusing and complex and just blows you away before you can even get into the topic. So I had to deal with that, how to like even get to what I wanted to talk about, because there's just so much interesting stuff. Yeah, on the nutrition side, manganese is a trace nutrient your body needs, but if you get too much of it, it can cause problems, which are like a lot of things, but it can cause really bad problems when you get too much of it. But it looks like, when I mention it, that it looks like human cavemen were using this stuff.
That's okay. So I
Going
read
back like 30,000 years. So it's not new.
that, and that, so how the article read of like them doing it in the medieval times, using it to make the different colors. And then you went into the cavemen in the article, that I was like, with all the cave drawings and stuff, that it's like they had to have used it for, and fire. Now you're telling me maybe that was how they started it.
Yeah, and so and this is not the first fire starter I've heard of. It's the third, because I wrote an article, Iron, the Firestone of Life. I was looking at how cave people are using nanopyrite as a fire starter. And then I wrote the article on magnesium, and they were using magnesium as a fire starter. And then I read about manganese, and I'm like, oh my God, you can use manganese as a fire starter.
Oh,
So I was like, whoa, I used to not know anything about fire starters, and now like these elements, I'm like, I can start a fire. but this one's really cool because it looks like they could use it as a cave crayon, and they could use it as a fire starter, which is really cool.
which is amazing. You said that it comes from like the area around Turkey. Is it found like in our vegetables and foods, and like, is it just from, because I get magnesium lotion, because supposedly using the lotion is better than taking a supplement with magnesium. That's what I hear. And kind of like how we put the iodine on our, our wrists or somewhere on the body to absorb better. So I get mine that it is from that area. It is they're going into, the Dead Sea and whatnot, getting it. Is it only from that area, or is it
No, just the name is from that area, but it turns out it's manganese is found naturally in trace amounts wherever iron is found, and iron is found all over the world. So wherever there's iron, there's also some manganese there. And that's the best way to understand it, is to think of, I researched it, and the best way to think of it, instead of getting manganese confused with magnesium, instead I want people to think manganese is kind of like iron, because it's right next to iron on the periodic table. It's naturally found with iron, and there's even some enzymes in the body that use both manganese and iron. In our mitochondria, the SOD superoxide dismutase 2 that I talk about in detail. So yeah, it's really associated with iron, and nutrient wise, what's really cool is the same receptors in your gut that absorb iron also absorb manganese.
Oh,
so if you take a whole bunch of iron, you don't absorb much manganese. If you take a whole bunch of manganese, you don't absorb much iron. Okay. Huh. So that was really important. So everywhere I'm from every angle, I'm looking at manganese. The best way to think about it is just like manganese is like iron. It's found with iron. It evolved with iron. The body had to process it with iron. It's doing something. You can start fires with iron. You can start fires with manganese. So I have a really great article, The Iron, the Firestone of Life, where I talk about nanopyrite. And it really seems to be, and so a really important theme that I figured out from you probably didn't read this one, but a long time ago, before I wrote the article on iron, I wrote an article on copper.
Yeah, I haven't read that one.
But what's really important, and in that article about copper, that was the first time that manganese came up on my radar, because I was reading about copper and I was like, copper is used kind of like iron, and in one part of the body for the superoxide dismutase protein, which is really important. We can talk about it, but in most of your body uses that protein with copper and zinc, but in your mitochondria, it uses iron and manganese.
Okay, Ben, let's remind everybody what the mitochondria is and what it does.
Well, that starts getting us into the biochemistry. I don't want to bog us down. I I just want you to know that there is this connection where evolutionarily it looked like life first used copper and then it used iron and then maybe it used manganese either with iron or after iron. I don't know which one came next, but basically copper is older than iron, and it appears maybe iron is about the same age as manganese as far as your body using different pathways. But it does similar things, and what it was using it for is to process oxygen chemistry a lot of times.
Okay. So
Okay.
thank you for putting that little bow on it. So you're saying the evolution of man, it was first our bodies were using copper, then it went to iron, and then maybe manganese.
Manganese, yeah. And it looks like for most of our body, so like in like bacteria and pathogens that attack you, they fight with your body over iron. And whoever gets the iron wins because they can use the iron to create oxidative damage and fry their enemy. So a lot of what our body does is I had the article about copper containment, but really it's iron containment as well, is our body keeps the iron separate where other stuff can't get it. So like in our blood, it's not just free iron floating around. If the iron floats around freely in your blood, that feeds bacteria and that's bad for you. Instead, we have transport proteins in our body to carry the iron around. The iron in our blood is in heme molecules inside of red blood cells floating. So it's not just free. And pathogens like malaria that like to pop your red blood cells to get to the iron and attack you. So there is this sort of like fight between where your body has to control the iron and pathogens that attack you try to get the iron. It's kind of like that because whoever has the iron is using the iron to create oxygen damage. And it's kind of similar. And so it looks like back in the old days, it would fight over copper, but as our body evolved to then use iron as a separate pathway to fight over iron. And then for some reason there was, so, and this is really interesting because back to your question, what are the mitochondria? The mitochondria are like little things inside of every cell of your body that help you make energy.
Right.
Okay. And I was taught in school that they think that mitochondria might have evolved from bacteria that lived inside of our cells is maybe where they came from. However, looking at this, it looks like they're more closely related to it. I don't want to say this is true or not, but as far as the manganese goes, it looks like it's more closely related to a fungi, like because the yeast use the manganese and the iron, but the bacteria like use nickel or another thing. So yeah. So, but anyway, a big thing I noticed in this that's really important is that for this, if you look at this one protein in particular, which is called superoxide dismutase, which is a protein that breaks down oxygen radicals. So there's oxygen that have an extra electron, which are really damaging in your body. And it breaks those down into less damaging hydrogen peroxide and just regular oxygen. And then it has the hydrogen peroxide is still dangerous, has to be broken down further with other enzymes. But there's this really important enzyme in your body called superoxide dismutase that does that. In all of your body, except your mitochondria, that protein uses copper and zinc. Okay. But in the mitochondria, it uses manganese.
Whoa.
And so
that's where you were going, Ben.
And so that's what I'm trying to point out. So there's something really funky going on with the evolution of, okay, why are we using manganese here? And I think it has something to do with this evolution of we went from copper to iron to manganese. And so your body has different tools it can use to play with oxygen. And I think manganese is used by the body sort of like as a sophisticated tool. Now, that said, where does manganese come from? I told you it's all over the world where there's found with iron, but it's found in plants. Okay, and this is really important because in every plant, plants make oxygen, right? They take in CO2 and they spit out oxygen. In that protein that spits out oxygen from plants, it uses 4 atoms of manganese in it.
Wow.
Okay, and so I have a thing at the end of the article talking about that. But so for most people, where do you get manganese? In your diet from eating plants. Okay, because if it's a green plant, if it does photosynthesis, it has that enzyme that has some manganese in it.
This is amazing. This is wonderful.
And when I looked in detail at that enzyme, and I think I put a picture of it in my article, I'm getting to the second part of the article. We just skip right into the biochemistry. Sorry, we skipped a bunch of stuff, but that's a really important point is where do you get the manganese? You get it from the plants. Okay. Yeah. But these cave people might not have been eating plants. They were, maybe eating meat all the time, but they were still throwing manganese in their fire. So they weren't manganese deficient, even if they weren't eating plants.
Right. And we don't know. They might have been.
So we don't know. They might have been omnivores. So anyway, it got me thinking about Neanderthal nutrition. Like, are they getting their manganese from plants? Are they just cavemen only eating meat and they're just throwing it in their fire because of their fire starter? Either way, they were probably getting plenty of manganese. So they were not deficient in manganese. Okay.
Right.
If anything, people in ancient days were getting too much manganese because they were in caves, or a lot of them were working in mines. A lot of them were slaves being forced to work in mines. And they were getting exposed to, there were a whole bunch of things like lead, and there was a red selenium that was toxic, and they might have been getting manganism from too much manganese also, especially in the mines where they were mining this pyrolusite, the black ore I was talking about. Because it was so valuable. So there's an area of Turkey where they must have had mines there for that. And
so there was a white, I'm going back to the article because you jumped into a part of the article. There was a black one and a white one, the ore.
Yes. And so there were two ores. One was white, one was black. The white ore was the and they were both called lithos magnesia, which meant rock from magnesia. And the white one is what we would now call a magnesium oxide, and the black one is a manganese oxide.
Okay.
So the black one, the manganese oxide, is the one we're talking about in this article.
Right.
The white one is the magnesium one, which I talk about in my magnesium article. It could also be used as a fire starter, and it's used in fireworks and stuff. So it also is very fire happy.
Pause for a minute with that fire stuff, because since you've been talking, of course, another part of my brain's thinking. So all of this are actually quote unquote fire starters that are in our bodies. So not only am I thinking about electricity, but I'm also thinking, or energy wise, I'm also thinking, Ben, right now there's a whole lot of the states that is covered in smoke from fire. I wonder if we have that stuff in our bodies, it's like fire fighting fire. You see what I'm saying? Like if this helps us with our oxygen in our bodies, then that's kind of like fire fighting fire, because we need oxygen to live, yes, but even probably to change what we're breathing now. We're like a plant taking in the smoke that's all around us and releasing. Am I making sense? I'm kind of going that way of interesting that.
Yeah, I don't know what they're putting in the environment. I read it. That could be they're throwing sulfur up there or something, and sulfur is kind of like oxygen. Right. The energy in our body is very complex. Like we use, like our body is using like oxygen to oxidize carbons, and also it's storing the energy and oxygens on phosphate groups, like in ATP. It's storing energy as hydrogens in like NADH. So it has all these crazy pathways in the body. But in the in plants, in photosynthesis, you're taking light from the sun to kick out electrons, and you're taking electron energy. And a lot of times oxygen is used as a final electron acceptor, but it's like there's a whole complex pathway in plants in the body where you're taking electron energy, you're turning it into proton energy, you're turning it into phosphate, which is oxygen around phosphate atoms energy, and you're also turning it into carbon energy, like in these sugars. And then it has all these pathways to store energy. A lot of them like is stored in carbons, like in the one related to the one we're talking about, manganese, is pyruvate. There's this molecule called pyruvate in the sugar cycle, which is like carbon storing energy, and it can be like oxidized. The body oxidizes to get the energy out of it when it wants it, or puts it together to store energy. And there's an enzyme that uses manganese in that. But the way that it's doing it, and I showed pictures of it, is the manganese is stabilizing a phosphate group. And the phosphate is phosphorus with a bunch of oxygens around it. Okay, so the manganese is like a positive ion, and oxygens are negative. And a lot of the things in the body uses ATP, adenosine triphosphate, where it'll turn ATP into ADP, and it'll knock a phosphate group off, and it'll release this phosphate energy to make stuff happen. But whenever that happens, it usually has to stabilize that group. And previously, I figured out that the way it normally does it is with magnesium. And what I figured out in this article is it has an alternative way to do it with manganese.
Wow.
So the body can actually use either magnesium or manganese in some places. And in my article, I went into really detail into this one brain protein that I talked about that can use either magnesium or manganese, but it has a higher affinity for manganese. And that's probably important because it makes it slower. I don't want to blow your mind there, but I don't know if you saw that part of my article. I have a really big part with a bunch of pictures about this brain protein. It's called, what is it? It was glutamine synthase.
Yeah.
My article.
Yeah.
And I took this one protein and I looked at it in really big detail and say, okay, what is it doing with manganese? And my gut was telling me, I think it's just using the manganese to stabilize a phosphate group. And that is what it was doing. And it turns out it could use magnesium or manganese to do that, except that this protein prefers manganese, not magnesium, and it slows the protein down a little bit. And there's different signaling pathways in the body, and different time frames are important. Like calcium, magnesium, and zinc are all signaling molecules, but they work on different time scales. So it made me think, I didn't mention this in the article, but this is what my brain is thinking. I'm thinking that that manganese is probably used as a signaling molecule in the body with a different time scale than those other ones.
Yeah.
And it appears to have a slower time scale than magnesium. So it's just a different way the body can do the same thing, which is stabilize these phosphate groups and it does other things as well. So it can be involved in this oxygen pathways or stabilizing oxygen on these phosphate pathways. So those are the two main ones that I saw.
Do you think, Ben, because maybe the time frame or time schedule you said is different amongst them, that maybe manganese, I think I just said it correctly, maybe not, is kind of like our it's like our safeguard or whatever, like our safety. Like if it's going to use up a bunch of other stuff, but yet this is still here, like maybe that's our safety net. That's what I was looking for.
And that I can't tell if it, so here's a question.
Yeah.
Is the body wanting to use magnesium and it just has these manganese in the way, or is it wanting to use manganese and it has magnesium in the way? Well, this glutamine synthase says it has a higher affinity for manganese. So it appears the body does want manganese on purpose, but there are a lot of cases where your manganese can get high when your iron gets low, and it seems to be a problem. Okay. But so I wouldn't call it a safety net because there's too much like talk about toxicity, but when it gets too high, what it does is there's a part of your brain that has a lot of iron in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called the I think it's the substantia nigra. It's this black matter in your brain, and it has a bunch of iron there, non-heme iron. And when you get too much manganese, the manganese goes there, and that part of your brain. This was the part that blew me away. So I don't know if you can stay with me here, but I found a connection between manganese and thyroid hormones. Okay, which is very interesting to me because thyroid hormones contain iodine, which is my expertise. Okay, and I've been studying iodine and the thyroid for a very long time, and I didn't realize that there was connection between manganese and the thyroid. Okay, but the connection is, it turns out that manganese affects dopamine neurotransmitter, and dopamine neurotransmitter controls TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. So there's connection between manganese and the thyroid hormones, and they mostly had it. Most of the evidence we have is all negative. So like, when you have too much manganese, it's going to substantia nigra, screwing up your dopamine, and you're getting less thyroid hormone. So there's connection between hypothyroidism and too high manganese. There's a connection between too high manganese and too low iron. Because when your manganese is higher, your iron's low because they absorb in the same place. And so a lot of women were suffering from anemia, didn't know why. And so big picture take is, if you read my whole article, and you don't have to worry about manganese nutrient. You have to worry about iodine nutrient.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
because usually if your manganese is high and your iron is low, it could be a toxicity like cadmium in the way, or something else blocking that +2 pathway. You could be low magnesium. You could be, but usually 99% of the time, people are just low iodine, and
Yeah.
so it's trying to imagine, and it's trying to up. I want to say this right. I don't know if this is correct because it was really complicated to understand or talk about. But I think what goes on is when your body, let's say you don't have enough iodine, but your body wants to make more thyroid hormones. It'll send certain signals to do that, but then it can't do it. And one of the signals that might happen is you might end up with high manganese somewhere where it's not supposed to be.
Right.
It's like make more, but I can't. And so that's how minerals get out of whack when your body is trying to tell a signal, but it doesn't have the right minerals to do that signal. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. And so I want to tell the audience too that Ben and I did a complete video about his detox system with iodine and how it helps the thyroid do its job. I mean, very much so do its job. So if things are getting mixed up or it's sending signals, but it's just not being able to get there, that's what Dr. Ben here is talking about, is that with the iodine, gold, and silver detox system, it gets your thyroid moving and working not just properly, but to the optimal ways that none of this stuff will be blocking or not being transmitted. The fact that those two are linked like that, Ben, that's really fascinating to me, and also linked to the dopamine.
Yeah. So that in itself was so complicated that it almost deserved its own episode. But so I'm trying to talk about manganese, and now it's got me into neuroscience all the way to advanced biochemistry, because it's talking about manganese in the mitochondria. And that's what the thyroid hormones do. The iodine in them, they go to the mitochondria and they promote more energy and more metabolism. And you read about manganese, a lot of stuff in manganese is related to metabolism. And I told you that manganese is used in the mitochondria. So yeah, there's a huge link that I hadn't even thought of before. But what it comes down to is, first of all, are you going to be low manganese? No, because if you're eating some plants, you're going to get enough. Are you going to be high manganese? You shouldn't be like way too high unless you're in one of those industries, like I think it was welding, smelting, battery making. There were some industries. The big one was welding. If you're a welder and you weld aluminum, so I knew before from my previous article on magnesium that 1% of aluminum, that magnesium could be alloyed with aluminum. But I learned in this article also manganese can be alloyed with aluminum. So your aluminum cans actually have 1% magnesium and they have 1% manganese in them. So the aluminum welders can actually get manganese fumes, get too high manganese in their lungs, and have problems with that. So, but unless you're doing something like that, you're not going to be too high manganese. Okay. But people kind of in the middle instead, and they don't even usually test for manganese. Okay. By the way, even if you do blood work, they don't even test for that. But what they do test for is iron. Okay.
Right.
And so a lot of people, what women see, men and women, but it's more prevalent in women, is they'll see low iron, anemia. Like, why is my iron low? And I bet you the take home from this is a lot of times when your iron is low, it's probably that your manganese is high. And probably the reason iron's low and manganese is high is because you're iodine deficient or have some toxin, is what it comes down to. So my strategy is just take my iodine system. It'll fix the balance. But if you really want to get detailed with the blood work test, if you have low iron, you could also pay extra to get a manganese test, and you'll probably see your manganese is high.
Wow.
And also you'll see that you don't have iodine and your thyroid's also screwed up. All your minerals get screwed up.
Yeah, it's all screwed up. And, and so if you've never been to Stars of the Morning Light, we record a video with Ben once a month for his news article. And we keep learning how our bodies need the iodine to really have it working to the optimal grand human that we can be. Because, the problem is, Ben, is we can say eat your fruits and vegetables, eat your green, greens. I love when I eat my greens. I feel like Popeye. I mean, that's so great. Strong. But who knows in today's world, and how often do people, I'm learning now, Ben, that my home is not the average home. I mean, we try to have a salad at least every other night, if not every night, or some kind of greens or something. That is not the average, at least American home. That's not the average. I mean, most people I realize as an adult, they're lucky if they get it twice a week, and their kids as well. So all of the stuff that they're eating that is also putting everything negative in their body, that can be all flushed out. So if you take the iMedu system, flush everything out, and then just add some greens, a bit more in the diet, you're good. I mean, you're literally good.
And I can't eat anything green. I'm not going to be able to eat anything green for a while without thinking, oh, look, you're a plant. You do photosynthesis. You have manganese in you and your oxygen evolving. That's going to go through my mind every time I eat something green for a while.
Yes. You eat it more. Like, I'm going to be like, yes, yes, you got going on. Especially if it does do everything that you're saying that it does. And with the mitochondria, all of it. It's interesting, and you might have not looked into it, but I'm now curious about the dopamine aspect, because people,
yeah, and it's not just that neurotransmitter. It's thought to be a bunch of other neurotransmitters. That was just the article, and the article said like it probably does a lot of other neurotransmitters too. Like it's just overwhelming what it's doing.
Yeah, it's being there for metabolism, you said, that kind of stuff, right? Well, people that their dopamine is haywire or not working as well as it should, or too much or not enough, or that affects all of their what was like the word I just said, their how fast they process things.
So what I want to tell you is there are excitatory neurotransmitters that like activate, go, okay, and in the astrocytes, which are these other cells all over your brain, there's a lot of manganese and this protein that deactivates them. So the manganese was involved of shutting the signal off. After the neurons fire, you fire. Okay, I'm good. Now I need to go back to normal and relax. And it required the manganese to do that. And a lot of this manganese is in the astrocyte cells in the brain as another pathway of what the manganese was doing. And so if your manganese pathway gets disrupted, it can really screw up your brain. It was the take home. Your astroglial cells can swell if there's too much, or your neurotransmitters get stuck on if it's off. So yeah, it was really involved in the neurotransmitters. I'm a neuroscientist. It gets really complicated. I just took one brain protein to talk about and one thing dopamine to talk about. There's a whole nother world of it I didn't talk about, and it just blew my mind with how much more I need to research.
Wow.
But just take home is manganese is involved a lot in the brain. The other thing I want to talk about was calcium. Okay. In that plant protein where we get manganese from, I think it was like 4 molecules. I think it was either 2 or 4 molecules of manganese, but also there was a molecule of calcium stuck in there. And that's important because in our body, manganese is doing a bunch of stuff with calcium somehow too, because most of the manganese in your body is in your bones. Okay. And there's studies of manganese deficiency, like rats who are deprived manganese, they grow up with bone and joint problems and stuff. Okay. So there's also some serious overlap, and probably it could be that I just think manganese might just be a signaling molecule and it interacts with the other signaling molecule pathways like calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. But I found at least 2 different things it's doing. One stabilizing phosphates, one it was in that SOD protein. It's used for oxygen pathways. But I think it might be a signaling molecule. It's doing stuff in the brain. It's doing stuff in the bones. It's doing stuff in the joints. It's doing stuff connected to the thyroid, which is connected to all metabolism, and the mitochondria, which are your energy plants of your body. So it's really critical, important what it's doing, but it's kind of complex.
Yeah, no, but this is fascinating because yes, I mean, anybody who looks at the periodic table is going to go right past it. And I mean, seriously, it's not like I studied a whole lot of science, but I did get A's in chemistry in high school, so I can at least follow along. And yeah, I mean, nobody spoke about this stuff. I didn't even know it was in my body. That's how much when I started reading the article, I went, oh, okay, you're in my body.
And that's part of why I'm doing this, is because, like it's nice to know, oh, this is in me. What is this? Like, this is a part of creation that's out there, which I may not have been aware of, and so it gives you lots of ideas. And so, back on that topic, my favorite way to see manganese is not as nutrition. I love it in gem and mineral stuff. There's a form of it called rhodochrosite, which makes this beautiful red color.
Yeah, I saw that in the article.
And my sound cut out. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you now, Ben.
Yeah, I used to live in Houston, and in the Houston Museum of Natural Science there, they had a really great gem exhibit, and they have the red one that I showed, the Alma Queen, and it looks like a giant ruby, like the size of your fist. It's just so beautiful. You go in the museum, and apparently the metaphysics of it is for self-love, but I really love that rock. It's so gorgeous, and so I put a picture of it in there. But it is manganese. It's manganese carbonate is the rhodochrosite.
When I was reading that part in of the self-love and then staring at the gem, I was thinking about what I'm reading, of course. And if it is a transmitter, like if it's just talking, if it's just moving things about, right? I was thinking at that time of that is self-care, talking within the body. You know what I mean? Talking to yourself, communicating with yourself, that I was like, it was such a good article, Ben, that it made my mind go into many places. And when it brought me to the self-care, I went, learning that this is now in my body, I was like, oh, I need to probably talk to you, of that, get back in tune with communicating with my body.
And then also, when on the subject of colors, I talk about the chameleon reaction, where the potassium permanganate, and I did this in chemistry lab one time, but they figured out you can make these purple crystals, you can turn them green, you can turn them red. I mean, it's just really crazy. I had a story. I didn't tell the whole story in the article because I was kind of embarrassed about it, but I'll tell it now on your show. In chemistry lab, we had this is an organic chemistry lab. This would have been like circa 2002, like more than 20 years ago at Texas A&M University there. And I was so excited because the chemistry lab, we're going to be making these purple crystals. And I didn't know or care what these purple crystals were. In retrospect, I see what they are. Oh, these are manganese crystals, potassium permanganate. But the chemistry lab was only 3 hours long. And I wanted to make these crystals so bad. I was going so slow, so deliberate, so careful. And then I only had 15 minutes left in the lab and I wasn't done. And I had to rush the very last part. And the very last step, it had to put some acid in there to do the reaction. But if you just barely overdo the acid, it makes the crystals dissolve and you don't get any. And I didn't get any purple crystals. And all the people around me got them. And I was so jealous. I was like, I got purple crystals. And I was mad because I'm really good at chemistry. I wouldn't have screwed it up, except I got rushed at the end and added just a little bit too much acid.
You were taking your time. You were having so much fun putting everything together. Yeah.
But what I didn't know until reading this article is those potassium permanganate, which they're crystals, but they're like a salt crystal that will dissolve in water. Most crystals don't dissolve in water. These you can actually dissolve in water and make the purple. You can take the purple crystals, you can dissolve them in water and make a purple liquid.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I have a picture of the flask with a purple liquid and also show the purple crystals. But when you turn them into a liquid, that potassium permanganate, you can actually use it as a medicine. It's very similar to hydrogen peroxide, but a little stronger. And so I read all these articles. People were using them like the way that I use silver on wounds, or people use hydrogen peroxide on wounds. People could use potassium permanganate on wounds also as well, because it's an oxidizer like hydrogen peroxide, has a lot of oxygens attached to it. So that was neat. So also you can use potassium permanganate as a medicine, which I thought was also neat.
So we went from fire starter to then caveman drawings to all over the body, especially the thyroid and the brain and everything. And into then you can create these crystals that also can dissolve. And it's like, it
Of
can
all
be,
different colors.
yeah. Do you think that we always knew this, Ben? And then somewhere this information disappeared? Do you
Yeah,
think
I think that the Greeks really knew this information.
okay.
And it's really obvious to me. It's obvious to me that this crystal, they would have been using it in their temples. So it was in the area where they had temples of Artemis / Diana, basically the mother goddess, Rhea, Leto, Latona. She had a whole bunch of different names, but they had those temples over there, and their stories about, they'd make fire and smoke. So you could definitely use magnesium or manganese, those stones in their crystals, but also they were doing healing in there. The temples of Apollo were doing medicine. And like, I guarantee you they were using it for medicine. They were using and they were using that pyrolusite, which is magnesium oxide, and they were doing some, and I even figured out who the people were who knew how to do this. They were probably even making metal alloys of it. There were these people called the Telchines or the Curites, these people who were basically the sycophants of the mother goddess religion. They would dance and do all kinds of stuff, but they did a warrior dance. Like, I think that they knew about how to do this because they were into metallurgy and they called it magic back then. Metallurgy and magic. There's basically a group of metallurgical magical people, like the people, and they were the same people who built the Colossus of Rhodes, which is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. So obviously they really knew bronze working. So goldsmithing and bronze working is older, much older than iron work. Iron came later, but these were that area in Turkey was where the iron working and making steel and stuff was first discovered. And it was discovered probably a long time before they shared it with other people. And they just used it in their temples, and their priests knew how to do it. Okay. And in their warrior cults, they were, why did these Spartan people have stronger steel than us? Okay, well, because they, are mixing it with manganese alloy from their. And so, yeah, I mean, it's very clear to me. I think they did know how to use this. I think that they had it. They even maybe knew some of the neuroscience of it. And that's maybe why in the Temple of Artemis with the and the Philosopher's Stone stuff people talk about in the Middle Ages that came out of this was because they remembered that connection. So if you think that the thyroid is the soul, like I have an article on that, or if you think the pineal is the soul, there's a connection between the brain and the thyroid, and there's a connection between manganese, which would have been that ore, and the brain and thyroid. So I think they had some inclination of that.
Yes.
And how much exactly they knew, I don't know, but I definitely think that they probably knew that manganese was an important nutrient for children. And they also, I think they knew that if you get too much manganese, it would basically turn you into an orc.
Yeah.
Okay. So these really high people with manganese, it goes to the substantia nigra in your brain, screws up dopamine, and it gives you muscle tremors, ataxia, hallucinations, makes you aggressive, all kinds of things. And so I think that there were a bunch of people. So if you look at that, I didn't really get into this article because I don't want to freak people out with the ancient stuff, but I do think that I got a very strong impression that there were a group of people who were slaves who had to work in the mines to get this stuff. And a lot of those people got very sick, and a lot of those people rebelled. And those sort of like in the Lord of the Rings, the people depicted as orcs. Oh, you're slaves. Like, no, really, they were slaves who rebelled. And they're all, and the orcs are all because they are actually, they would be if they had too much manganese and their dopamine was screwed up and they couldn't walk straight. So some of those stories probably were real from these people, these mining problems. And
oh my goodness,
for the miners,
that. Yes. I mean, we know from just our society the problems that mining could do, but think about back when and knowing what this can do. Yeah, Ben. Yeah, roll with that, because I'm tracking. Most of my viewers, I'm sure, are tracking with that. Of course it would.
There's an area in southern Spain called Alhambra, or the Red One or something, the Red One. And they had a lot of, like in Carthage and Spain, like the Novo Carthage, they had a lot of slaves working in the mines there. and they worship the mother goddess who they called her the red one. And I'm wondering if they knew about rhodochrosite or manganese or, I don't know, but there's a really obvious connection to me.
Yes.
So to answer your question, I think this is ancient stuff that, maybe I did it in a past life and it's just coming, but it's just hitting me like bricks in the face. Like, oh my gosh, like this is so neat.
Yeah, this is, especially because it's something that we would generally just completely overlook. I mean, I don't believe if I looked at my vitamins right now, that would even be listed.
It is. It would be in your vitamin as a very small thing. It's in pretty much every multivitamin. I think I listed the multivitamin I recommend only had a little bit, like 10 milligrams or something.
Yeah.
Very small amount. But that was like over 8 vitamins. It was like 1.5 milligrams per pill or something. And you only need like 2 milligrams a day. So you really don't need much manganese. So I think it's added in all multivitamins. It's found naturally. I wrote an article called Breast Milk and Multivitamins where I compared breast milk to formula to multivitamins to egg. Manganese is found in trace amounts in all of those.
Oh, okay.
So they do put it in multivitamins. They do put it in formula. It is found in milk. It is found in egg. It's found across the board. It is a critical nutrient. You need a little bit. You don't need much, but you do need a little bit.
Okay.
But
okay.
if you're just eating some plants, you're gonna get enough. Or if you're a caveman and not eating plants, and if you're using it as fire starter, you might be getting enough.
Right. Or maybe you're a caveman and you're eating a lot of meat, and the meat had eaten a lot of plants. Like maybe that's how they got it.
Yeah, but it didn't seem like there was much manganese in meat.
Yeah.
Which is different because like there was a lot of selenium in meat, but I don't think there's much manganese in meat. And so you really have to eat the plants. It's found in like plants, nuts, grains is where you can get the manganese. So that was an important point. If it's important to my carnivore listeners, if you're only eating meat, you might not be getting enough manganese. So you might want to go back to, if you only want to eat meat and not eat plants, you might want to throw some manganese fire starter in your fire, and then you'll get the manganese. Yeah. I thought that was an interesting point.
We clearly need it, and we get our iron from meat, but you clearly need it.
You get lots of iron from meat. You will definitely get the iron from meat. You'll get selenium from meat, but you will not get enough manganese from meat.
Huh. Fascinating. See, nature balances everything out, and clearly there's a reason why we have it, why it's there. And you're pointing out all these different reasons why we have it. And you're also pointing out with your detox system, if it's not doing its job appropriately, it's probably because of the lack of iodine that's there to move everything around.
And then I noticed something, I guess you'll appreciate this, but did you also see that the manganese can have a metallic form where it'll make a silver colored cube?
I think that is when I was reading and I went, okay, well, that's that so, I was like, and that because when I read that, that's when I went, and that's in me. So then I immediately thought of the movie Terminator, and I was like, oh, this could be cool. And then I went, Courtney, just put it down. Like, so
it's not. But what I thought interesting was, my health supplements, iodine, silver, and gold, and all the colors of the iMedu system are also found in manganese, because it can be like silver colored, it can be brown, it can be purple, it can be, like iodine. You put iodine on a piece of paper, it'll turn the paper purple. Yeah. The word iodine comes from iodase, which means purple. So the word iodine means purple.
Right.
So I think my love of purple crystals, which ended up making me get into iodine science, came from these manganese crystals that I was so disappointed I wasn't able to make back in chemistry a long time ago. So I had that love of purple crystals, and then I found better. And the iodine crystals you won't see them ever, but they're almost black, but they're like a metallic metalloid black color that turns purple. And you see in the health supplement, it looks like a brown, but it turns purple if you put it on paper. So anyway, that's just neither here nor there, but just all the like colors are like sort of the spectrum of healing that I feel from my iMedu system. I also felt all of that from manganese.
Yes.
And that connection was like, oh, this is sacred to the mother goddess. This is sacred to the mother goddess. They both are like ancient medicines that were suppressed, is how I feel. And also, oh, really important point is, I think that these ancient Greek people, they had a story about how the mother goddess cured Hercules of insanity.
Okay.
Okay. And I thought that was important because I think a lot of these mine workers would get lead poisoning and they would go crazy from lead, and other things, could be manganese too. But I think these ancient people knew how to cure them using gold medicine, like I do. Like how I figured out that that gold will detox lead. And if you're going crazy from lead poisoning, you can take gold and it'll fix you. I think these ancient people knew how to do that.
Yes.
And they were doing it with gold and silver and iodine, but also they were using this stuff, which I'd never heard of before. Pyrolusite, manganese ore. You can do a lot of crazy healing stuff with it.
This is fabulous. I mean,
Art, and you can do art stuff. You can do art and healing. How that's just so Temple of Artemis style, because Temple of Artemis were gold and silver, and the word Artemis was Artemid, art in the middle. They were looking at the middle of the Milky Way, but it's just, and they had these temples just full of art and gold. Of course, this would be in the temple. This would be like, I'm sure they would have a red rock just like that in there.
Oh, I mean, I can completely see it. It's fascinating to think, because ladies and gentlemen, you beautiful stars, Ben is going through the periodic table. He's going to be writing articles about all of them. That it is fascinating to really to take that deep dive with you, Ben, reading it and listening to you here, because we're so far from that stuff, and that's what we're trying to get back to, in my opinion. It's stuff that we always used, we always knew, we always were able to attain it and heal and create. And you're helping that. I mean, it's fascinating to learn all of it.
And I'll try to connect it with modern audiences, but it's hard. Not everyone's going to believe me, but there is evidence that these ancient temples of Artemis were directly converted into Christianity. So basically, Artemis became the Virgin Mary.
Yes.
Like one to one. I don't know if everybody believes me or not, but that is what my research indicates. So I'm telling you, if they had this knowledge of manganese and pyrolusite in those temples, it did probably pass to some people in the West through the Catholic Church. A lot of it was, this Turkey area was in the Byzantine Empire, and the Byzantine Empire was raided in the Fourth Crusade by the West before the Ottoman Turks took over. But there were people who still have this knowledge, and I have to wonder. I'm not associated with these people, just so you know. But have you noticed there's all the rich investment firms are called like BlackRock? Yes. Like BlackRock or Blackstone, or there's a whole bunch of these where they're just obsessed with this word BlackRock. Right. And I have a theory. I don't know if this is true or not, but I'm wondering if that comes from this Blackstone, the manganese oxide pyrolusite, or not, from an ancient religion. I don't know. It's just speculation. I'm wondering if the BlackRock of BlackRock is actually that BlackRock or not. Right, because it could be pyrolusite. If you have much, you go crazy. Yeah, you would be docile and crazy and messed up in the head. So, So I made that connection. I don't know if that is true or not. Well, I'll have to ask a BlackRock person, what BlackRock are y'all guys talking about? But this is an interesting BlackRock that has all the different colors, is a nutrient, it's used for medicine. It blew me away. So I got to tell you, pyrolusite, quite interesting. Right. This is fascinating. There's always, all names, all stories, all everything. It's coming from somewhere, from somewhere in our ancient past. So, Ben, before we let you go, and I also want to tell you, Ben, that our viewers, they wish you and I could just film and film and film and film, but ladies and gentlemen, you beautiful stars, Ben goes to the local library to do this for us. So we only have about an hour of a chunk of time. And so I wanted you to know that, Ben, that most of the time people are like, oh, we could keep listening to Ben nonstop, which is good to know, especially with this information. Guys, you have to go and read the article, and also either contact Ben for a free consultation about his detox system, or if you already know it and you
would like some, you can go to starsofmorninglight.com, or the link isn't below for Ben and I. Guys, with the onset of everything, I would say in the media, I can say, because Ben might not be able to, I can say I feel safe. I feel completely safe that whatever comes through the air, waves, air, all of it, whatever comes through, I can say that I feel completely safe taking the iMedu system. I just do. And even to the point that I was doing too much yard work and my knees started bothering me. I took a system, there goes all the inflammation again. So it's a matter of, for daily life and whatever might be happening, as we are moving back towards understanding and incorporating the ancient knowledge into our lives again. Ben, I got to thank you for, I mean, it's really a service to humanity that you do.
I do a meditation every month, and you get whatever comes out of my brain. But it was pretty interesting this month, so I'm really happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a great article, and that it is attached below, everyone. Please go read it, because there was no way Ben was going to be able to talk about everything that's in the article here. I think we did a great job hitting a bunch of key points, Ben. And so I appreciate you doing this. And what's the next one for, what are you doing next month?
I haven't decided yet. I have a lot of good topics. I want to talk about boron nutrient. I haven't done that yet. Maybe I'll do that next month.
Boron. Yeah. Wait, boron. Is that in our body? That's a nutrient?
It is.
Oh.
It's the word sounds like boring. So it's hard to even think about, because boron sounds boring, but it's not.
Wow.
So that's just a possible topic. I have other ones, but
Okay.
But yeah, I'm trying to hit up. So I like to either talk about nutrition or detox. Also, because of the air quality, there's some other detox things I want to talk about. I want to talk about barium detox, strontium detox. Hit the ones I haven't done yet. I've already talked about aluminum and lead and all the big ones, but I want to get to some of the smaller ones.
Yeah. The small is even completely fascinating, that we are the most perfect bodies, especially if we can use Ben's system, because our bodies can handle anything. I really do believe that. Do you believe that, Ben? That our
Absolutely.
Designed to handle anything that's thrown at them? Yeah, I think so too.
It really does. And you don't have to worry about manganese nutrient very much, because your body has natural process. When you eat it, if you need more, it'll absorb more. When you need less, it'll absorb less. It has a feedback mechanism for absorbing mechanism. The body is really smart. So
wow, that's fascinating. So smart we are. Well, beautiful stars. Thank you, Ben, for joining us and talking about manganese. I did it right, manganese. There we go. Yes, finally, she said it correctly. Oh, so many big words. So once again, please read the article below. If you want to contact Ben, his information is below. If you already know the system and you need some more, the link is below. And Ben, until we see you again, my dear, have a great summer.
You too. Take care.